another visit to Istanbul. Actually my 47th visit to Istanbul, so there's definitely something about this place that keeps drawing me back. And actually I really like being here. It's a fascinating place. It's full of history, and this whole notion of it straddling Europe and Asia is so true. Turkish people are very open and friendly, and they are a real mixture of some typical European, Southern European thinking and some typical Middle East Muslim thinking, and they've got a really interesting balance there between the two. And yesterday I had a really interesting experience. I went down to the Sultanahmet district, which is the historic centre of old Istanbul. So you've got the Aya Sofia, the Church of Holy Wisdom, sitting there, and across the plaza from it is the Blue Mosque, the biggest mosque here in Istanbul. And then behind them you've got the Topkapi Palace, which is the ancient palace of the Ottoman sultans. That's where they had their seat of power for hundreds of years. So it really is riddled with history. But I was there in particular to sit on a bench in front of the Hagia Sophia, which is now a museum, and talk about its place in the landscape, not just literally and physically, but also spiritually. And it's 2 days before Good Friday. I'm flying home tomorrow, and then looking forward to spending Easter at home in Chester. I've just been thinking about it. Easter in many ways is the main festival for Christians. It's where we celebrate the death and resurrection of Jesus. And many people would claim it's just a myth. Maybe many people laugh and just say only crazy people would believe that. But then when you look at a building like this one behind me, you do have to ask yourself, what would make people put so much effort and so much time into building something so beautiful if it was just a myth? If you think about the thousands and thousands of man hours that it would take to build something on that scale, something significant must have motivated them. They wanted to memorialize the reality, the actual existence of God and his son Jesus, and they wanted a place in which they could worship Jesus and recognize and testify to the incredible difference he'd made to their lives. Nowadays we're not so dependent on a building. We don't feel the need to go to a particular place to worship God. We can pray anywhere, we can worship him anywhere. Now many of us do attend church buildings, but we're not as welded to them as perhaps people were back in the 6th century when the Aya Sofia was built. But still, as I'm walking around a place like Istanbul, I like the fact that I'm reminded by its presence on the skyline that I'm just the next generation in a very, very long line of people who've all experienced the resurrection power of Jesus. They've all experienced the difference he's made in their lives. And we've all got this urge to testify to it and to tell other people about it and to worship him and thank him for what he's done. And I like the fact that the Aya Sofia has survived so much as well. So for 900 years after it was first built, it dominated not just the skyline of Istanbul, but it was the biggest building that anybody in this entire region would ever see in their lives. Then in the 15th century, the Ottoman invaders came, they took the city and immediately converted the Aya Sofia to a mosque and plastered over most of its murals and obliterated a lot of the carvings and the statements that had been carved into the stones. And yet still, here it is, it's survived all of that. It's survived several earthquakes. The dome has been cracked and repaired. They've had to put buttresses around the outside to keep it standing. So it's taken some knocks and has been through a lot, and yet here it still is. It's still a testimony on the skyline to the faith of those people in the 6th century, and I feel a connection with them, and I can relate to that. We've all taken knocks, haven't we? And life isn't smooth, and it's not always easy, and we don't always feel like we're getting the upper hand of the circumstances that we have to live through. And yet in all of that, the resurrection power of Jesus never goes away. It's always there to be found. So I like to go to that place as often as I can, and I just feel like I'm reconnecting with people from centuries before who carried the same torch that we're carrying. And as we celebrate Easter, we're celebrating the exact same events, the exact same significance, and the exact same consequences as they were all those years ago. Speaking a different language, perhaps worshipping in different ways, but we're united because we're focused on the awesome resurrection power of Jesus.